Hi everyone, welcome to Outside Lane, and here we are. The one video I was so excited to make. The one where I get to talk about some of my favorite songs of 2025. And you know what? God damn it, I needed this one. For as underwhelming and, let's not mince words, vacant the pop music of 2025 was, I managed to find some solace in the releases outside of the mainstream that this year had to offer. And more than ever, this was quite frankly the hardest list to make. Not just because of the amount of music I listened. For anyone who isn't aware, I checked out 307 albums from this year, which is something I don't recommend unless you have loads of free time or is currently unemployed. But if you look underneath the mainstream or just dip a little bit outside of it, you will see that 2025 still managed to have some fascinating releases. It was still a really damn good year. I mean, to be fair, there is no bad years for music unless you're in a really specific space, which is what the mainstream charts is. So what I'm trying to say is that this year was honestly a great one to deepen your taste in music. And you know what? I think we need to explore some of those hidden, or not so hidden, gems. So let's get to the rules. Honestly, it's pretty simple. Any song from a 2025 album counts here. I can also count standalone singles or deluxe tracks where the deluxe was released this year. And if for some reason a song from a 2025 album was actually released last year, I'll still count them here because I most probably did listen to them this year. That's kind of it for the rules. Also, this is my opinion and perspectives. Obviously, I might have similar perspectives from other critics, and I will try to find interviews from the artists to prove my point. A lot of these songs will have a personal connection with me, and if for any reason they don't do it for you, that's fine. Share your own favorite songs of 2025. I would love to hear the comments. Anyways, that's all I had to say for the rules. Now, let's begin this video because my god, it's gonna be a long one. As a trend that you will see in this video, there will be a lot of artists that I sought out for the first time this year that still have a pretty extensive career in the field. That happens. It's a common experience for a lot of people. So let's start this list with one of those said artists. In this case, James K, New York artist who's been in the underground scene since the 2010s. I first recognized her name because she was in a song from Ive Tumors' 2018 album, Safe in the Hands of Love. And that was kind of it. But I had the opportunity to listen to her newest record, Friend, which sadly didn't really connect with me that much as I wanted, but thankfully, it did give us this beautiful gem. As a very pretty dream pop song with some touches of guitars, some atmospheric synths, the drum and bass percussion, and a pretty nice groove. The combination between the electric guitars and the breakbeat percussion was legit terrific, as it gives the song some muscle while still not losing its ethereal atmosphere. And James K's falsetto sounds pretty damn good, especially combined with her lower register. Also, the addition of sound effects like the usage of sirens surprisingly don't feel out of place, especially to sell the urgent tone of the instrumental. Now in the lyrics department, while doing some research to see the artist's point of view, the only thing I found was an article where she said that it was about turning her anger into ecstasy. And looking into it, I can at least see it, as, at least from what I portrayed, the song gradually moves on from that anger after what seems to be an undisclosed bad experience into finding some sense of solace, turning into something positive, so you can move on from it. With those themes and the sound itself, I can see this going off in a live setting. So yeah, for as much as I wanted to like Friend a lot more than I do, Play felt like an immediate spotlight from the beginning, and with more listens, it felt more than justified being here. Truly terrific.
In my dream, I saw him, the man without a head.
Now for an artist that had a bit of a breakthrough in 2025, here we have Australian artist Nina Geraci, whose pretty strong debut album I Love My Computer as its electropop sound that dives through so many trends of the genre with lyrics of her own online experiences and the love she had for that period of time, mostly the early 2010s. I mean, that's kind of what you expect with an album called I Love My Computer with a song called Fuck My Computer, caused a big commotion in many music spaces, and even resonated with a lot of people. I will say that I was in fact pretty impressed with this debut. Even if not everything worked for me, the highs are certainly worth to talk about, especially as an exploration of the electronic sound of the early 2010s. But for me, the instant highlight was Info Hazard, which only got better with time. And it kinda doesn't really take a magician or a computer to understand it. I like a lot of the trance genre, and Info Hazard does absolutely hit the right spots when it comes to that genre, as the pretty keys that open the song that is then dropped for that verse where you get the bass line and Nina Geraci's multi-tracked vocals. As the song starts building up and the keys come back, you get introduced into a drop that is just a ton of fun, where the synths and the heavy percussion and bass make it sound like a rush. It's such a pretty song in every sense of the way, where I guess Nina Geraci's vocals don't have the most presence, especially the chipmunk vocals, but as a part of the mix, they just fit like a glove. And as happy as the tone of the instrumental is, you'd be surprised that the lyrics are kind of the opposite of that, as it's about Nina Geraci stumbling into a gore film of decapitation, which obviously she didn't really mean to see it. And when you discover that fact, I won't deny that it will give you some tonal whiplash, but with the theme of the album, for her love and nostalgia of the technology she grew up with, I do think it makes some sense. As with the benefits that came with those devices, like her love for music production, it also came with its detriments, which was stumbling into gore footage when you didn't really want to. It's surprisingly kind of a common experience. Not a good one in any way, but one that I believe a lot of people have experienced it before. So yeah, even with that bizarre tonal shift, I don't know, I still found it to be an incredible song that stuck with me throughout the year. No wonder she loves her computer, because if that's what she does with it, then I get it.
Yes, I saw her spiraled hair.
Okay, now for an artist who needs no introduction whatsoever, while it does seem like Paramore is still on Hayley Williams' priority list, she also dabbled into her own solo music, having dropped 2 albums in 2020 and 2021, which I did like, especially her debut Petals for Armor, which was a big presence on my Spotify Wrapped in 2020. Oh, the old days that I don't ever want to come back to. But after the release of This Is Why in 2023, Hayley Williams finally gave another try to her solo material, with the release of a bunch of singles in July, which was then repackaged into an album in August, with a new single added into the tracklist, which, while being a bit too bloated, I still enjoyed it a lot, as every genre switch up from trip-hop or alternative rock don't really feel out of place. And Parachute was actually the one song that was repackaged with the album, and honestly, I understand why this was added with the album, because this might be the best song on it. A pretty earnest but sentimental declaration that wound up not working, as the serene main chord progression that then matches with the heavy guitars and the drums that bring an intensity to the instrumental that is so welcome, which sounds even more chaotic with the added distortion in the chorus, plus with a great groove and Hayley Williams' performance that gets progressively more desperate as we get more explicit details in the lyrics, and honestly, you got me on board, where that chaos and desperation is understandable with the context of said lyrics, where she decided to put full trust in this relationship that wound up not being reciprocated, where all of her dreams wound up not becoming a reality, even culminating in a wedding where both parties resented each other, even if she wanted to make it work so bad. And at the end, she considers that she fell headfirst into a relationship that was never going to be secure. So really, you get a pretty fantastic song that feels sincere in its heartbreak. And honestly, I love it. It's enough grounds to be on this list in my opinion.
It was the cost, and she said he flossed, and she bought a loft, and she moved to Compton, then moved to Spain. She does this often, I'm trying to soften the.
And now, let's get on the Pop Perfection Bible category, starting with the Ohio native musician Sudan Archives, who's been slowly making a name for herself as one of the most boundary-pushing artists of this decade, mixing a lot of styles from the electronic genre with a lot of more classical elements. Which makes sense, especially knowing that Sudan Archives herself is a classically trained violinist. And her newest album from this year, the BPM, cements that ambition pretty well, as she dives through genres from her heritage, especially from the Detroit and Chicago dance and techno scene, resulting in a wild and sometimes inconsistent album that still manages to be a lot of fun. So let's start with the first of 2 songs, My Type, which might be one of the most conventional songs of the record, but it still manages to be such a bop, where all of the synth melodies and flourishes are sticky. It has one of the most infectious grooves of the year coming from that bass line. The percussion feels punchy as all hell, where every switch up is better than the other, and Sudan Archives reveals herself to be a surprisingly great rapper, where she shows so much personality and a very tight flow that makes it so much fun. Every single decision sound-wise feels calculated to hit you in the right spot. There's this one sound effect in the middle of the second verse that is so well placed that honestly might just be my favorite part of the song. As I said, it is the most accessible song on the album, but it's truly such a joy that it's not really a problem, as she seeks for a woman that defines her type, who seems to be the adventurous but no-nonsense kind, but she seems willing to take that passion forward. It's horny and silly, but it makes it work for a song that is already intentionally silly. So at the end of the day, well, it's just so much fun. Student Archives truly made a song that I can say that is my type, and I'm so happy that it's as good as it is. I'm surprised that I haven't talked about this artist on my channel, FKA Twigs, another artist who's been pushing the echelon when it comes to her sound, with her experimentation going through so many swings, and for the most part, getting extremely positive results. I can say that I've been a fan of her for a couple of years now, since Magdalene in 2019. She released 2 new albums in 2025, with Eusexua coming in January, and the sequel, Eusexua Afterglow, coming in November, which dives further into more house elements. And while both albums are really damn good, I feel like they worked more in pieces than as a whole album. With that said, the good songs are spectacular, and Hard might be one of her best full-on pop songs to date, as its more metallic elements like the synth keys and the haze of atmospheric synths mixed with the synth bass, the metallic percussion, and FKA Twigs' heavily filtered vocals that don't take away from a great performance still leads to an absolutely ethereal atmosphere that makes it sound surprisingly human, even with its electronic elements, as you see her full embrace of love for someone who she doesn't know that well, as that mystery is what makes it so thrilling. Which, I mean, it's not exactly new grounds for her, it's kind of the same premise as Perfect Stranger from Eusexua, and I mean, some parts of the lyrics can be kinda silly, but also, who said that love can't be silly sometimes? It's that embrace and trust that she gives to this person in this intimate moment that makes it feel like she can lose herself, even if again, still not knowing that much from this person. And when it sounds this amazing, honestly, it's hard for me to give a fuck. So at the end, you get a massive highlight from FKA Twigs this year, one of the most thrilling and yet fun pop songs released this year. And still not shying away from the electronic-tinged bangers, here we have Rochelle Jordan, Toronto-based artist who's been making a name for herself over the last few years. I was first aware of her because of her collaborations with Kaytranada, especially from his 2024 album, Timeless. But once I started listening to more of her music, I started really enjoying it, and in 2025, I was absolutely sold on her sound. With her excellent album Through the Wall, an album stacked to the brim with house and dance bangers, which is impressive for an hour-long album, where it doesn't feel excessive. And this was one of the records that I actually had a lot of choices I could have added. I'll shout out songs like Sweet Sensation, Grave, La Di Da, and Doing It Too, the latter being featured on the 100 to 51 video, but if I had to pick the biggest banger from it, it has to be Close to Me, which is more inspired into the garage sound, as that fast tempo with the chopped up hazy synths and the heavy bass and percussion, and even some horns present in the intro and outro of the song. It really sets up a heavenly atmosphere that balances between being a vibe and still kicking plenty of ass, especially because of the garage-inspired beats. And Rochelle Jordan's vocals help in the atmosphere as well, as she commends the mix like she's trying to evoke the house or disco divas. And while I guess the lyrics aren't that complicated, a pretty standard hookup song where she feels best with her lover close to her, I don't have that much issue, mainly when the rest justifies its simplicity. It's a massive banger. A simple one, but still one that I'm happy to have it close with me.
He said, baby boy, just come here, never fear. Let me pull a quarter from behind your ear. If I show you how to do it and you get the magic right, you can.
Well, about time he showed up. If you somehow don't know, this is McKinley Dixon, Virginia-based rapper who has become one of the most acclaimed rappers of this current generation. Is this an over-exaggeration? I mean, not in my part, that's for sure. This hasn't been the first time I mentioned him. I mentioned him on my Best Songs of 2023 video, with the song Run 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 from his 2023 album. And in 2025, he decided to come back with an even bigger concept album, that being Magic Alive, a non-linear narrative album about a group of children who discover the magic of making people come back to life after losing their friend, while still not shying away from other themes of his earlier records. It's an album about coping with death, but it is so much more than that, as it's an exploration of said magic, what really defines that magic, and what power it can really have, all combined with his orchestral jazz rap sound that he's grown to perfect in this album. So yeah, it's pretty easy to say that it's one of the best albums of 2025. So of course he was gonna show up on this list a lot. So let's start with the first of the bunch, Listen Gentle, as the gorgeous instrumentation is amped up to cinematic levels, with the presence of the horns, the woodwinds, the live drums, the string section, and McKinley Dixon's immaculate flow, as the key change that transitions the instrumental break before the last chorus elevates the heavenly atmosphere into sublime levels. It really just leads into a spectacular instrumental. As by the themes of this song, it starts with a relative of McKinley Dixon demonstrating that magic. McKinley Dixon said that there are plenty of meanings for that magic, but in my opinion, in this case, it could be the power of his words that was passed down from his grandfather, which is mentioned in the song before this, FFOL. As that magic gets passed down to newer generations and gets twisted up into ways that distance from its original meaning, sometimes even being out of their control, especially when everything is stacked up against you. And you can hear the grief in McKinley Dixon's words, as the main character of this narrative tries to keep the memories of his friend alive, and tries to reach out for him in some way, and that doesn't really bring him happiness, either for his community or himself. It's a complex song, and I'm not sure if I managed to give the full picture of it, but one thing I will mention when I'm talking about this album is not just the absolutely amazing production, but also McKinley Dixon's knack for wordplay and storytelling, where it makes it feel very human. And even if I don't get everything about this song, I can still say that it's a terrific one.
Uncle said, nigga, you must be sick. All you talk about is just getting rich.
Here's one of the big stories of the year, the long-awaited comeback of Clips, coming full force in 2025 with the album Let God Sort 'Em Out, which surpassed all expectations and turned out to be one of the best hip-hop albums of the year. It's great to see that they still got it, even being in the industry for more than 2 decades, and for Malice's case, being away from it for a while. So of course it wasn't a surprise that they were gonna show up here, starting with probably the most anticipated song on the album, Chains and Whips, which is because of, well, you know who. And it did not disappoint in the slightest. The funny thing about this song is that it was first teased back in 2023 during a Louis Vuitton show of all things, as they produced most of the album in the Louis Vuitton's headquarters. And apparently this song and the Kendrick verse in specific was the reason they decided to leave Def Jam. That's how much confidence they had in this song. And I mean, I get it, because this is absolutely terrific, as the beat featuring that imperious kick drum, and the electric guitar riff, and the muted bass riff, and the addition of some wonky horns, as it's a somewhat minimalist beat that tries to evoke a feeling of fear that really works. It's pretty fitting for both a Clips song and Pharrell's creativity when it comes to beats, which sometimes tends to go badly, but for most Clips songs, it does really work. His presence on the song itself is pretty effective too. Some of his hooks on the album have been its biggest complaint, and in some parts of the album I do understand, but it does work for this song, where the minimalist beat can take space for both Clips and Kendrick to show their skills as MCs, as the first verse from Pusha T being a direct diss to Jim Jones. For my audience who knows more about mainstream hits, remember We Fly High? Yeah, that's him, because of his criticism of Pusha T being on the Billboard's top 50 greatest rappers of all time. And he doesn't waste a second, as he mentions his insecurities to maintain the lifestyle, which is one he cannot maintain. Malice then picks up the second verse with the sinister imagery by mentioning those whose identity is the money, while also mentioning what the life in this dangerous game can lead to, as Kendrick Lamar gets that final verse, with an absolute tight flow that keeps the vibe going, where he sees that hip-hop is in a dire situation, to a point where he feels like his royalties should probably go to someone as cherished as Rakim. He's watching the party die, where he can call out the vices in the industry and isn't afraid to do so, where both therapy helped him to not hold back on his words. By the way, that therapy line in specific is just truly stellar. Not to mention the gen rhyme scheme on his verse that is just amazing. There's probably a lot more that I'm missing with this. Again, there's so many layers on this song and album in general that I couldn't mention just on this video, but one thing about this song is that it's legit awesome. If this song and verse was the thing that costed them their publishing deal, then I completely understand, because his verse and song as a whole are deserved of all of its praise. So as I said plenty of times, for as bad as this year was for mainstream music, there were in fact some bright spots. And wouldn't you know, PinkPantheress just happened to release an utterly terrific EP that solidifies her pop formula with amazing results. It's quite possibly her best project, and to show that, here's the second single from the record, Stateside. And yeah, it is that fucking good. While Capable of Love is still PinkPantheress' most ambitious song, Stateside takes her pop sensibilities to near perfection. As a drum and bass song with some of PinkPantheress' best hooks, as the bouncy beat that features the two-step percussion, the bass touches that become more intense as the song progresses in a pretty satisfying way, and some synth melodies that are just so good. The one that appears in the first chorus is just absolutely beautiful, plus with a fun performance from PinkPantheress that makes this even catchier. There is a slight interpolation of American Boy by Estelle and Redacted, and To Freak Like Me, most specifically the Sugar Babes version, which kinda random, but it does fit more with the nostalgia window for this song. And honestly, they didn't really bother me, mostly because in this case, it does feel like a fun homage to both songs. Plus, the former does fit with the lyrics of flying stateside for a hookup with an American guy. Nothing really that deep, but the more carefree tone of the lyrics still fit with the adrenaline rush that is the instrumental. This just has hooks for days, as it encapsulates PinkPantheress' talent to make wildly sticky but still amazing bangers. If we're talking about pure uncut bops, this might be her best one so far.
It's the memory of the real thing you had known since.
Now for a banger that sounds scintillating in every way possible, here we have the LA duo After, who I kinda just stumbled into them accidentally while doing my 2025 albums deep dive, and I kinda fell in love with both of their two EPs released this year, where it kind of nakedly takes from a lot of the turn of the millennium pop sounds, but when the hooks stick as much as they do, my god, it just fucking works. 300 Dreams was the first song I listened to, and even having listened to both EPs, this was still very easily my favorite, as it's a chill wave inspired pop gut, with the drums very reminiscent to the baggy genre, with the gleaming keys, the looped distorted bass, and some faded guitars in the low end. It just creates an atmosphere that the only way I can describe is just being a dream. All combined by Justine Dorsey's serene delivery that just fits so perfectly with the atmosphere. It sounds like a song that you had memories from when you were younger, and where the rediscovery feels much sweeter. Kinda reminiscent with the lyrics of remembering something from your past that reminds you of nostalgic moments of your childhood. And I mean, you could call this derivative. It absolutely does not hide its influences, and it's not exactly reinventing the wheel, but when it sounds as good as this is, honestly, I think I will excuse it this time. Again, going back to some of the criticisms, I at least understand where they come from, but man, this one touched my nostalgia zone to a point that I can't really let it go. A shot of poptimism that works so well for me this year. So yeah, I believe it's fantastic. So here we have Singaporean indie pop artist Yol, an artist who's been hyped on social media ever since their debut album Serotonin in 2019. Their sound, from what I've heard, can be described as more of an ethereal kind of dream pop with touches of glitch pop. I'm honestly not really sure if I can call myself a fan. I've listened to all of their albums by this point and enjoyed it a fair bit, but I always feel like there's something missing for me. And sadly, that also kinda happened with Evangelic Girl Is a Gun. Even if some themes on the album were pretty interesting, it never reached its full potential in my opinion. Now to be fair, this one got a bit more of an underwhelming reception than with earlier records, where a lot of the singles wound up being the best songs on the album. But my god, those singles were legitimately great. Doo was pretty close of being on this list, but at the end, I wound up going with the title track, which is this weird glitch pop track with some rock influences, but also some progressive EDM influences. As the noisy guitar melody, the glitchy bass, and the percussion that gets progressively heavier, especially in the last chorus, combined with Yol's detached vocals, filtered through multiple pitch shifters, I guess that's not something out of the ordinary for Yol. They have made weirder songs, but this, in concept, I don't know if it's a combination that should work as much as it does, but it truly does work. God, every time that bass hits, it's just so good. The song technically has 3 parts, where the tempo gets faster and the transitions are just immaculate. Yeah, this one is a roller coaster of fun, where its noisy elements are what makes it so cool. This album might have not been the one to really sell me on Yol, but this song is one step close to that at least. and for another artist that it was a matter of time until they showed up, this has been one hell of a year for Jane Remover, who's been very prolific either with their main music, from the release of Revenge Seekers, or the Hard EP very recently, or other projects like Ghost Holding and Demonic Venturing. A lot of it that's been legit very great. I will say that before 2025, I was not really a big fan of Jane Remover's music. I heard Census Designated in 2023, it was good, but it didn't really excite me. But with both Ghost Holding and Revenge Seekers being truly great projects, I got on the bandwagon. And if I had to choose my favorite from Revenge Seekers, that has to be Psycho Boost, a frenetic song where the distorted but different sets of bass and percussion kits keep amping up the tension, as every drop to release that tension is one punch of adrenaline that is just so worth it. Even some of the more hardcore elements, like that one specific drum that appears after Jane Remover's first verse, should bother me, but yet it just makes it even more of a blast. Like seriously, imagine this song and most of Revenge Seekers in a live setting. It would kick so much ass, as Danny Brown and Jane Remover take turns trading bars with each other, and they have a pretty good amount of interplay. It feels like they are hyping each other up. Also, some people were surprised by Danny Brown being on this song when this came out, but this shouldn't really be a surprise because, I mean, he now has an album with plenty of artists in the hyperpop/digicore genre, which is not his best, but it's still pretty fun. But also, the man is legit a massive fan of the genre. He's just happy to be there. And while the song's lyrics is more about going hard at the club, there are some statements that Jane Remover makes. As in this case, they are coming back to the music the fans want, mostly because of them, taking total control of their decision, which in this case, I do at least understand it. I know Jane Remover has a complicated relationship with their fan base, and not every time they're in the right, but I at least get that. I have started going to the gym over the past few months, and if there is one song I consider one of my first choices to play while I'm exercising, this is one of them. It's legitimately such a fun time. Of every entry that's here, this is probably the one that might surprise people the most. So this is Japanese post-hardcore/screamo band Asunojoke, who've been active since the mid-2010s, but as per usual, I got way too late for the party. From what I've seen, they got a decent amount of acclaim in 2022 with their sophomore album called Island, and they have toured with pretty legendary Japanese rock band Boris, so they have managed to amount some achievements. But with the release of Think of You in 2025, I was honestly stunned by how much I really love this album. A lush but still powerful album that has a myriad of riffs and heaviness, especially coming from the vocals, while still not excluding its bright melodies. Even not understanding Japanese, on sound alone, it wound up as being one of my favorite albums of 2025. So let's talk about the song we have here in this list, which the title is translated to Tomorrow Is Your Day, the closer of the record, as it is exactly how I explained, as the bright guitars that still pack a lot of punch are undercut by the heaviness of the drums and Nuno's guttural screams. I guess if I could make a comparison, it would be with Death Heaven's album from this year, which was another highlight from 2025, but much brighter on its melodies. I think my favorite part of the song is when they tune another guitar melody that accompanies the main guitar riff at the middle of the song, and I just love its interplay. And that optimism is shared in the lyrics as well, which, I mean, they are in Japanese, but thankfully Asunojoke do leave a translation available on their official Bandcamp site. As for this song, again, from what I perceived, it feels like the narrator is trying to convince someone, potentially their partner, to thrive through the depression, as they want to help them to see the good in life, not just the blue that they currently view. Which, I guess it's funny that he's screaming such a hopeful message, but I don't know, I think it feels pretty earnest. In a year like this, honestly, I think I needed a post-hardcore album that just sounds as anthemic as this one, and Asunojoke delivered in spades this year. So check the album out, but if you don't want it, at least check out this song. It's legitimately a blast.
Baby, you come down, baby, you come down. Streaming if I'm looking up, and baby, you come down, baby, you come down.
And for another act that I'm far too late on the party, here we have Baths, who's an LA native artist who, as per usual, I only got into in 2025, even though he has a very extensive career that goes to the early 2010s. I'm sorry, it happens. From what I've heard, the best way I think I can describe his sound is indie-tronica, where it makes sense that he's an avid fan of video games. And I mean, it does work on its favor, because I did really like his project from this year, Gut, a serene, warm record that makes me want for more. And it's been growing on me even more with the writing of the script. Also, it's gay as shit, so you know this would be right up my alley. So let's get into one of my favorite songs from it, Eden, which is such a lovely song, as it features a dance groove with a shuffling breakbeat patter, alongside with the twinkling keys, with some touches of strings that appear during the second chorus. And also there's some glitchy elements that subtly break through in the mix that don't really ruin the already elegant atmosphere, as William Weisenfeld's expressive performance only amps up the emotion, as he alludes to the Garden of Eden to invite this man to bed, because that's what the sex will feel like. It will take you to paradise. And I mean, when that breakbeat riff locks in, it already feels like you're going there, you know? I mean, if you want to talk about pure bliss that feels so ecstatic, well, this song is that. An absolutely delightful track that feels like heaven. This won't be the last time you'll see of baths on this list, but it is a taste of things to come, because this is just heavenly.
Tell me, can you tell me where my body goes? I don't wanna step on any.
See? I said we weren't done with Studio and Archives, because while my type is the banger that keeps on giving, Dead is the opener of the album. It will be your first impression for this album, and my god, what an impression it leaves, as it represents so much of what works for this album, as the orchestral and synthetic elements match in an absolutely beautiful way, as the song starts with the delicate string section that progressively gets twisted and chopped to match with the more artificial elements, especially as the percussion starts picking up a chaotic drum and bass rhythm. As every drop where the percussion explodes, it does itself in a way that I just love. As Studio and Archives balances her pretty falsetto with the vocal filters, especially the pitch-shifted backing vocals, which is surprisingly a great combination. And when you get to that last drop where both the percussion and bass get heavier as the rest of the elements in the mix also get more intense, it's just a true rush of emotions. And when I said that this was a representation of the sound, in a way that can be seen the themes of the song, as not just the introduction, but also her own reconstruction and evolution. Not just the song where she announces her return, but an announcement of her best version ever. A bold statement, but one that she can back up, especially with the craftsmanship in display. Honestly, the production on this song alone is an achievement, and putting it as the opening choice was legitimately a smart choice. Not only because it's a terrific song, but if you want the best introduction to get into this album or to Studio and Archives' music, this is it.
Call it easy, call it quick.
Now for one of the biggest revelations of the year, at least for me, we got Michigan-based band Racing Mount Pleasant, formerly known as Kingfisher, whose sound can be defined as to being adjacent to the windmill scene, which in this case, it refers to a specific UK scene that mixes post-rock compositions with more jazz elements, especially with the constant usage of saxophones. If you know a band like Black Country New Road, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, this scene can have its pros and cons. I've seen some complaints where it's being said that the sound is being beaten to death by this point, and in some points, I can somewhat agree, but when it hits, my god it does. And while Racing Mount Pleasant are from the US, and they do tend to also mix Midwest emo elements, they absolutely nailed that sound, especially with their self-titled album from this year, which feels like an interesting take to the genre, especially with a loose concept that deals with grief and the uncertainty of endings. And Call It Easy wound up being the highlight for me. A 7-minute journey of a song that starts with the slow, gentle drums, the nice bass line, and the guitar rollick, as Sam Dubose and the backing vocals from Casey Cheatham and Tyler Finstead, that starts soft, but by the chorus of the song, explodes with the drums intensifying and the saxophones and rich strings appearing. And it does in a pretty satisfying way. And that balance between slow and explosive keeps going, which makes those moments even more epic. And that back and forth between tones do fit with the themes of the song, especially with the context of the album. As you dig deeper into the context, you have the protagonist coping with the death of his lover, Emily, who committed suicide, as plenty of mentions around that unfortunate day surround this album. Now with this song, I'm honestly still struggling if it's a conversation between his lover when she was still alive, or a conversation with himself, where in both cases there is someone contemplating suicide, where on those explosive moments it's either deciding or convincing that their story shouldn't end right there, giving a bigger weight to that decision, which I do think at least he comes from a right place. And then you have that outro, the final instrumental break, where every element already mentioned soars in such an epic way, especially the saxophone motif. Racing Mount Pleasant did an album that feels devastating, but it is one that needs to be heard. And if the description of this song convinced you of that, I think my job here is done. Terrific song.
Passion. Hey, passion.
I'm surprised that I've barely talked about Little Mix, especially because they were a pretty popular group during the 2010s, even if they were more of a UK thing. But currently, they are in an indefinite hiatus, but most of them have been releasing music. But the main ones this year were Perry and Jade. While Perry won't make an appearance here, sadly I didn't care that much for her debut album, Jade also dropped her debut, which is quite fairly a very interesting album that takes a couple swings sound-wise. It is fairly inconsistent and front-loaded. There were some legit terrific songs, and Fantasy is quite frankly the best song from it, as this electro-disco banger that features some godly spacey synths, the 4-on-the-floor dance percussion, the sharp bass line which just slaps beyond belief, and I also like the guitar motifs in both pre-choruses, where Jade gets to showcase her vocal ability without overselling it, where she declares that she wants to explore her sexual fantasies with this person, where she doesn't mind if it's weird or kinky or anything else that fits that description. And with the uplifting tone of the instrumental and the great vocals, it is a match for sure. Plus, you get the best part of the song with that outro that is just, oh my god, it's just excellent. As I said, not all swings were wins on that Jade album, but the ones that were, they were something terrific. And Fantasy takes its massive sound to fantastical levels.
Lost in emotion, mama's youngest. Trying to navigate life without my compass.
And continuing with the clip's praise, here's the opening song of the album, and talk about an absolutely haunting way to open it up, as that somber minor key piano melody that opens it up is already enough to orchestrate that chilling atmosphere, and Pusha T and Malice also do a great job on the verses, but that chorus with the gospel swell coming from the string section, and John Legend surprisingly delivering a phenomenal hook that is just truly transcendent. I did not expect him to deliver as much as he did. And that drama portrayed in the tone is understandable given the content of the lyrics, as in both of their songs they talk about the passing of their parents. In the first verse, Pusha T describes the death of their mother, which he felt every aching pain possible, especially by reminiscing some of the last memories he had with her, mainly because their last conversation wasn't a positive one, as he wanted to go to Turks and Caicos for Thanksgiving while she begged him to stay with his family in Virginia, or to resolve the issues he had with his older brother, and he feels a lot of regret that he didn't notice the signs that she was potentially setting up to leave this world. If he knew it, he maybe could have done things right. While on the second verse, Malice talks about the death of their father, as he mentions that he was the one who found his father, noticing that he might have also known that he was gonna leave this world soon. But as much as it is a description of his death, it's also a tribute, because in the words of Malice, he was a good father who worked hard to raise him, as he'll remember the last conversation they had, where for Malice, it was a clear I love you in his tone, as maybe a last goodbye. It's a pretty heartfelt message to cherish the moments you have with your parents because they don't last forever. Stylistically, it reminds me of a specific sound of pop rap from the early 2010s, and while that sound doesn't exactly lead to great results, in this case, I'm mentioning mostly recovery era Eminem. But in this case, especially with how great it sounds and with how gut-wrenching the lyrics really are, yeah, it really does work. When Malice said that this was the darkest he's ever been, yeah, I believe him.
Suddenly, I only know one thing.
Okay, so if you have noticed on this list, there hasn't been any country music here. And in fact, this will probably be the only country song on this list. While there were other contenders I was considering, and I did listen to a fair share of country albums, I don't really know what to say. There just wasn't that much that impressed me this year. But hey, if there's someone who can find a way to get on these lists, that is Rustin Kelly. And the funny thing is that the new album, Bail Through the Window, also didn't impress me that much. But Wayside was a highlight from the jump. especially because composition-wise, it might just be the catchiest song he's ever done, as its melody relies on an extremely catchy banjo riff, as the propulsive drums kicks into gear after that first chorus. That combines with Rustin Kelly's anxious vocal tone, as the heavier guitar tones and synth join in the bridge to amp up the intensity. It's a simple composition, but god damn it, it fucking works, as the lyrics match the urgent tone present in the instrumental and vocals, where Rustin Kelly wants a moment of peace with the person he loves by his side, as he sees the world collapsing around him, especially as he sees that doom scrolling really isn't a solution to his problems. It's less that he wants to ignore what's going on in the world, and more of just wanting 3 minutes of quiet, you know? Where he can share those moments with someone who loves and cares about him. And you know what? That sentiment does feel a little bit relatable. So yeah, I wound up really loving this one. The bones of it might lead to one of Rustin Kelly's most pop songs to date, but when he can make it work, yeah, it leads to something incredible. So in my opinion, it deserves a spot here. And speaking of records that didn't live to the expectations of their predecessors, now we have Amore, who released their latest album Black Star this year after the absolute rush that was Fountain Baby in 2023. And Black Star has not been as well received. And while I do somewhat agree, it doesn't have the more immediate hooks or immaculate production of Fountain Baby, and there were songs that were total misses, specifically the one where she interpolates Believe by Cher. That one was a big miss. But honestly, I still wound up enjoying it a fair bit, and I was excited with this album from the jump, because she decided to open this new era with this song. SMO is the sensual house song with influences from Detroit Club and from the Ghanaian genre of highlife, with a filthy as fuck groove coming from the bass line, as the heavy drum pattern and bombastic synths keep that nocturnal atmosphere going. I have to say, I love every different amount of synth tones in this song, most specifically the one synth pad in the bridge that is just absolutely spectacular. It feels very 80s Janet Jackson, and for me that's a compliment. I love Janet Jackson, as Amore can sound pretty comfortable in this mix, as the lyrics are kinda what you expect, as SMO is an acronym to Slut Me Out, which in this case, it's to do her in the most intense way possible. Especially as for her, she tastes like an antidepressant. No, really, that's how she describes it in the song. It's pretty horny, and it does sound like she's having a lot of fun. As I said before, I did still like Black Star. I could name other highlights from it, but sadly, there was only one song from the album that could really match the best cuts from Fountain Baby. But my god, what a great song that is. SMO is everything that works so well in Amore's music tight in one beautiful package, and I will cherish it for as long as I can.
Light all your candles, light all your candles for me now.
Okay, how about we talk about some rock legends? If you're in the know, I don't think Pulp needs an introduction. But if somehow you don't, Pulp is a British rock band who were very popular in the 90s. You might potentially know a song like Common People from their 1995 album Different Class. Great album, by the way. It was their biggest crossover outside of the UK, so this new album was their latest record of new material, after a 24-year-long break, while still dealing with some troubled moments, like the death of their bass guitarist Steve Mackey in 2023. And while they have absolutely proven that they still got it, dropping a pretty damn good album along the way, Got to Have Love was the immediate standout for me. Originally written in 1999, but it got shelved until this new album. And it's kind of simple to explain why I love this one, because it just slaps beyond belief. A dance rock bop with an infectious groove, accompanied by the galloping percussion, the guitar line, the bright synths, and the string section, as that chorus hits you like a ton of bricks. Especially that last chorus where it completely goes for broke, and not to mention the guitar solo that is just incredible. It's a kick-ass instrumental, and I guess the lyrics aren't exactly the deepest, as it begs everyone to have more love in their hearts. And I mean, you can say that it's trying to force everyone to put on a smile, but I think it is more sincere. Jarvis Cocker, the vocalist of Pulp, said in an interview that it did take him a long time to embrace the word love in real life, and this song is that declaration, and he invites everyone else to join him. Also, the tone is not trying to take itself too seriously, so for anyone still here that watches my Hot 100 videos, the comparison I could give is a much more charming version of Sunday Best by Surfaces. Been a long time since I remember that one. Anyways, this song still kicks plenty of ass. I'm very happy that Pulp is still going strong. Hopefully more great years can come in the future for them.
muddy down the mountainside, aging wolf and rotting hide.
Okay, yeah, this is the best song Baths have released this year. As much as I think Eden is fantastic, Sea of Men is the one that I gravitated towards the most. It kinda goes for a different territory sound-wise, although not that surprising from Baths, as that twinkling string melody accompanied with the credible bass line and the prim staccato keys, as Will Weisenfeld's very expressive vocals can sound as playful but also as horny, as he intensifies his tone even further as the song progresses. I also love the other layer of strings added into the song that give it a lot more opulence. It's just an absolutely beautiful instrumental with some seriously stellar melodic choices, which honestly is a complete contrast with the lyrics because there's nothing prim or delicate about this. I can't even call the lyrics of the song horny because it just goes beyond that. It's just carnal, as it is the most raw descriptions of his own sexual fantasies, descriptions that feel like a gut instinct. Hey look, gut. That's the name of the album. I mean, the imagery in the first verse, or the title alone, is already enough to make this very wild, but it feels like a song that tries to embrace their most devious sexual fantasies possible. And in that honesty, there's still a lot of vulnerability that can be shared from it. It's a beautiful song that you can feel the fun running from its edges, either by its gorgeous arrangement or its wild fantasies, and I'm so happy that it wound up being as good as it is. Now, let's look at one of the most sudden moves in pop this year. Although this is Miley Cyrus, so I guess this is just a casual Tuesday for her. After the underwhelming Endless Summer Vacation, she decided to come back with another wild record with Something Beautiful. An album embedded in a lot of 70s and 80s pop and art rock of the time, with the presence of some pretty interesting names either as features or in the production booth, from Kid Harpoon to Sean Everett to even Alec O'Hanley and Molly Rankin from the band Always. And while I can't really say it's her best album, I still have a lot more attachment to Plastic Hearts in my opinion, and it is inconsistent in some spots, it's still a damn great attempt with some of Miley's highest peaks ever achieved. And while a lot of people were completely astounded by the title track of the album, which was the first song teased, which, while I get it, it's pretty great and something wild even for Miley, I kinda fell more in love with the conventional pop song End of the World, the official lead single for the album, but also I feel like this was such an easy sell for me. A pop rock that tries to find the balance between its disco-inspired groove, especially ABBA, and the sheer bombast in the tone of the instrumental. The first thing that comes to mind is Bruce Springsteen, and while I guess it doesn't hide its influences, man, it still works for a damn terrific pop song, as the keys, the guitar touches, the drums, the bass, and the millennial whoops in the chorus help to create such an anthemic instrumental. The mix is slightly compressed, I won't deny that, but it doesn't really bother me, as Miley Cyrus's vocals can sound a bit more controlled until in the bridge where she can belt in a pretty effective way. And by the way, what a bridge, where it transitions from being completely anthemic to then stripping back the mix to really build that crescendo for the final chorus. It's legitimately stunning. As in the lyrics, it's a song about having fun and go partying in dark situations, or the end of the world. I'm currently recording this on January 7th, so yay, how fun. And while I guess this song could hit a sour note for some people, either sounding pessimistic or downright nihilistic, and if this was released in 2020, oh boy, I don't think this would work as much as it does now. I do at least feel like Miley was trying to convey the lyrics in a more earnest way, not just by how bombastic the instrumental sounds, but also it feels more like a commiseration with a friend or partner, where they can find some solace on the good times in life, pretending the world isn't ending for once in their lifetime. And hell, sometimes we do need that escapism in our lives. Obviously in the rare occasions, but when that rare occasion comes, it's just so thrilling. And in a song that sounds like this, yeah, this clicked in a pretty big way for me. Not the best song from Something Beautiful, we will get to it soon, but it doesn't remove its greatness. It still kicks plenty of ass.
It's that time of the year where I start getting old.
Another day and another Quadeca record that I don't care for, but somehow some song from it is so good that it has to be featured on this list. Last year it was with Texas Blue from his mixtape Scrapyard, and now it was with his more expansive record, Vanisher Horizon Scraper. Hell, a movie even came with it, which I haven't watched it yet, but I'll do it at some point. As the album expands on its more orchestral and maximalist sound, and look, I think it's a pretty ambitious record, but a lot of those massive moments just didn't really connect with me. Maybe I should give it a few more tries, and it could potentially click with me. Maybe I should actually watch that movie, but yeah, I just think it was a big attempt that didn't really work for me. So the most accessible songs wound up being my favorites, but I will give Quadeca this. Monday is truly a transcendent song, as the lush string section and the prim keys as they are matched by Quadeca's more sentimental tone, where his overdubs give him more depth to his performance. The vocal melodies on this song are pretty damn great, and Quadeca has been improving as a singer as well. I also love the flourishes that are added to this song as they keep going, as the second verse features the guitar and flute melody. As for that third verse, the subtle percussion kicks in, and while sound-wise it does go for broke, it never loses its melodies, which are absolutely beautiful. Each verse feels like it's trying to evoke a different tone, which makes sense with the lyrics, as he sees that he's still not over this relationship and maybe wants to try again, but is too scared to tell her because of her reaction. An anxiety that feels like a pretty common topic for Quadeca, as every verse defines a different season, the first verse being fall, the second being winter, and the third being spring, where it uses different descriptions to each season to define that feeling that's been locked inside himself, as he tries to tell himself to not give up and tell her his feelings for once. Even if it doesn't lead to anything, he needs to let him out. And with the pretty atmosphere, it does give a bigger weight to that heartbreak. Yeah, this is one that stuck with me through the whole year, and honestly, I'm glad it did. It's an absolutely beautiful song that, while doesn't make me a fan of Quadeca per se, it does make me respect him a bit more. So yeah, check this one out if you haven't. Every year, we do get a couple of alternative albums that will appear on most critics' year-end lists, and in 2025, we did get some of those. And one that caught my and many other people's attention was the band Geese, New York band which is led by Cameron Winter, who also saw a lot of praise for his own solo debut album, Heavy Metal, from December of last year, which I missed entirely because I kinda stopped listening to 2024 albums by the end of November of that year. But I'm honestly sad that I did, as it's a pretty good indie folk album that goes into some pretty wild territories. Plus, if it was today, Love Takes Smiles would certainly have a spot on my best songs of 2024 video. Now for the band itself, they started seeing critical acclaim with their 2023 album 3D Country, which I also missed at the time because, honestly, I didn't really know. But if you want my opinion, I did find it to be a great record, but they completely surpassed my expectations with their latest record, Getting Killed, which has become one of my favorite albums of the year, where they take their wild but also insanely fun compositions to bigger levels. And if you want to prove, here we have Taxes, as it starts kinda slow with the light percussion and Cameron Winter's vocals, which tends to be the reason a lot of people aren't into this band, and I mean, yeah, I get it. Cameron Winter is a, let's say, weird singer, but I don't know, I have heard worse singers out there, and I do like his vocals for the most part, especially because he knows how to convey the feelings of most songs pretty well. And for this song, you get Cameron Winter's character discontent with having to pay, well, taxes, where he knows that he's done some pretty awful shit in his life, which it is described in the album, but even he doesn't deserve this, so he decides to rebel against the system. He prefers to get crucified than to pay taxes, which is a funny premise, I won't deny, but it works pretty well. But then, you get that one moment of this song that made it go to this list. And yeah, it's the moment that the guitar riff kicks in, which, oh my god, it just sounds so good. What makes it even better is how the tempo gets progressively faster, and the drums get a lot heavier, and oh my fucking god, it feels like a rush. I just love it so much. Quite frankly, one of the best moments in music this year. Geese absolutely deserve the hype they've gotten in my opinion, especially with songs like this. Well, I guess Pulp weren't gonna be the only rock legends to make this list, because now we have the return of Deftones, who just like Pulp, don't really need any introduction. I mean, somehow even less for them. Deftones are just that big of a band to not need that kind of introduction. I will say that it was also this year that I started really getting into this band, especially as I got into their 2012 album, Koi no Yokan, and immediately fell in love with it. Now, Private Music wound up being a pretty good album, but not exactly one of my favorites from them. It still gave us bundles of greatness, like this song, as this fast and frenetic banger, as the chugging riffs mixed with the frantic drumming and Chino Moreno's reverb vocals that are layered as another piece of the instrumental, as it tends to be with most of their songs, all help intensifying the chaotic nature of the mix. The song is pure ecstasy from start to finish, at least until the bridge where that frenetic tone is dropped, where it features a pretty soft guitar riff in contrast with the rest, as it feels like the calm before the storm. And ecstasy is probably the right word to describe this song, as the lyrics also describe a certain feeling for ecstasy, as it features a lot of religious iconography, I mean from the title alone, or the mentions of the flood of Noah, as it feels like it's a call for some sort of divine salvation, a power so massive that consumes your soul and feels comparable to, well, the flood of Noah. It is more abstract than your average Christian rock song, so there could be more than meets the eye, but that feeling of ecstasy, either religious or not, is definitely there. And I mean, it is the feeling I get whenever I listen to this song, so they got that right at least. Yeah, this one is pretty simple to understand. A terrific banger that even in their 30-year-long career, it still feels impressive.
When I was born, grandmama could see it. I be Bentley driven and very strategic. RM sleeve, no diamonds are needed.
Oh yeah, Clips will be making a third appearance on this list. And unlike the last years where only one artist reached that achievement, mostly my album of the year, which Clips doesn't have that, they aren't the only one. But anyways, let's talk about this one. So Be It, which has a bit of a funny story around it, as it was first teased in June of this year on social media, but not released to streaming. And when the album came out, another version of it with a different and admittedly worse beat was added to it instead of the original. I mean, I remember it. I checked out the album the moment it came out. I remember when this happened, which was then corrected a couple minutes after the release. And it now has become, I guess, semi-lost media. I'm guessing it was an issue with clearing up the sample, but either way, it was kind of a funny moment. Either way, if we're just talking about cool, So Be It absolutely defines that word, as it has some pretty creative choices production-wise, with the terrific sample from Saudi Arabian artist Talal Mada, especially that chopped up string section, and the reverse 808s that works surprisingly well, where both Pusha T and Malice can sound as cool as possible. I especially love the flow from Malice's verse. It's just so tight with multiple quotable lines, as the song is a bit of a flex song where they can effectively diss anyone with precision and no fear. They can do it just for the heck of it. And if they don't, well, TMZ can do the job for them. Which, I mean, it's probably something that Clips don't agree with, but at some point, it's wind up gonna happening. You know, it's TMZ. What do you expect? As they sent various shots to multiple people, the most famous being that last Pusha T verse, where it's an obvious shot to Travis Scott, who he has no respect to because of his seemingly spineless behavior. Which, I mean, the diss isn't even the strongest from the album or even on this song, but knowing how Travis Scott responded to it, it more than did the job. I mean, if we're talking about songs that exude aura, it is this. Absolutely great beat with incredibly catchy moments and lines. It was one of the songs that I had the most fun replaying throughout the year.
I kept a scream inside my chest, killed everyone I'd ever kissed, hung them on the wall like trophies. Each night.
Oh look, Florence and the Machine being on this list. What is this, Fork Found in Kitchen? But I mean, yeah, no surprise that she wound up being here, especially when Everybody Scream winds up living to the expectations, as it dives through a heavier sound than her last few records, getting inspirations from post-punk, as it generates Florence's darkest and most direct album to date, where the targets are front and center now, especially to the music industry and its double standards. And while I'm not exactly sure if it's her best album album to date. She has such a high floor when it comes to her albums that it's honestly hard to tell, but it was an absolute slam dunk. And One of the Greats was special from the jump, which is probably the most explicit song when it comes to the main concept, as it features this smoky, distorted guitar riff, which was actually played by Mark Bowen, the guitarist of Idols, as it's accompanied by Florence and the Machine's expressive vocals, and still showing that she's one of the best in the game, alongside with the bass line. As the drums appear in the second verse, the song slowly starts intensifying, with the strings appearing and the tempo getting progressively faster, revealing more vitriol as it goes on, until it transforms into pure chaos by the final minutes. The song is one giant scream of frustration that feels justified, as Florence Welch dives into what you really need to do to become one of the greats, as she mentions a near-death experience she suffered during her last tour in 2023. She gives her life to the game, wondering if that sacrifice would be enough to be part of the podium, but still knowing that the double standard will still be there, as women in the industry try to constantly change their image while men aren't held up to those same standards, even if she admits that she can be a fan of those acts sometimes, even if they're doing the bare minimum and being lauded for that regard. The lines on the bridge are some of the most sarcastic but also cutting. It doesn't hold its punches. It's a vitriolic rant, sure, but one that you can see the years of frustration built into it. One that you start understanding where it actually comes from. And the fact that this giant rant wound up sounding as cathartic as this one does, it speaks to the talent of Florence and the Machine. So yeah, absolutely one of the best songs of the year, and one of Florence's best songs to date as well.
Your entrance was its own red scare.
Now for lesser known acts, but still not removing their legend status, do y'all know the band Destroyer? If not, they are a Vancouver-based indie rock band led by Dan Behar, who's been part of some other bands, but Destroyer is his main project. I am still diving into their discography, but I feel like I will eventually become a fan of them. For example, I adore their 2006 album Destroyer's Rubies, and their latest album, Dance Boogie. While it's not their best project, it's still pretty damn good for the most part. And the same thing as Nothing at All, the opener of the album, was the easy standout for me. And if I had to make a comparison right out of the jump with this one, it has to be Mahashmashana by Father John Misty, my favorite song of 2024, as the prim, cinematic sounding song that reached as many highs as possible. Now, it's not as amazing as that song. I mean, I'm not asking for that much. It's less opulent, even if the instrumental is still terrific, as that gorgeous brass line and gentle drumming that opens up the song that then transitions into the unsteady, slightly off-key piano melody for that first verse, where then Behar's more idiosyncratic sing-talk delivery won't be for everyone. But honestly, I think it works for the tone conveyed in this song, and the groove is still pretty strong. I also love the synth that appears halfway through the song, which is transitioned into a short switch-up, which then transitions into that opening bass line, but now the drums have a more intensive tone, and it also sounds so natural. A gradual change up that couldn't be any better, as you have the fractured lyrics that feel like a full-on midlife crisis, with weird and specific descriptors that you could come to expect from Dan Behar. But even if they are pretty abstract, and to be fair, kind of difficult to understand, they are at least fitting with the sweeping tone of the arrangement. I think this was one that wouldn't be predictable to be on this list, knowing myself. The second I heard it, I knew it was gonna be here, but I still appreciate how the song sounds so immense without losing any luster through its 5-minute run. It's been one I've been coming back to a lot lately, and for damn good reason.
It's a lot of cold nights, hunger pains in this bitch. Water whipping on some cane in this bitch. Robbing when they shit the slang in this bitch. It's a lot of...
You know, sometimes obvious pick is obvious. A Freddie Gibbs and Alchemist song with Anderson .Paak in the hook. On concept alone, this already had a shot to be on this list. The first Alfredo album was one of my favorite albums of 2020, as the collab album that made all of the sense in the world, and he worked as well as you can expect. And while the sequel that came 5 years later, yeah, 2020 will turn 6 in 2026. How does that make you feel? There were still some massive highlights that do come close to match the greatness of the original, like obviously Ensalada. Enchilada, which is probably the easiest song to like on this list, as you get a chill beat with the pretty keys combined with the guitar line, the snare drum, and the tight groove, and the terrific choir in the chorus. It's a pretty relaxing but still beautiful beat. For as much as The Alchemist can make an ass out of himself on social media, the man can still make a fantastic beat when he wants, as Freddie Gibbs keeps that chill vibe going with his performance, where he does a play on words with the "it's a lot of" line that opens his verses to sound like ensalada, which was a detail I did really like, where he reminisces on his past of selling drugs to survive, which I guess isn't familiar ground for him, but his descriptions can still feel pretty chilling, which is then contrasted by Anderson .Paak delivering one of the best hooks of the year, as he begs for an escape of that said life. I mean, as I said, this was a very obvious choice, but man, when it sounds this fucking good, honestly I just don't give a fuck. It's absolutely gorgeous, and one that deserves all of the praise possible. Sometimes you get those artists that, while you absolutely respect and appreciate their talent, you can't help but just feel out of the loop with them. And honestly, my biggest case over the last few years has been Perfume Genius. I have listened to a lot of his discography, and yet I still feel like I'm missing the picture. Hell, somehow my favorite album of his wound up being goddamn Ugly Season from 2022, and that's probably his least inviting album to date. And sadly, that also happened with his latest album, Glory, where no matter how much I tried with it, it just didn't really connect with me. And from the ones I've heard from him, it might be his weakest, not gonna lie. But the thing with his music is that at least his albums have one fantastic song on it. For example, No Shape has Slip Away, Set My Heart on Fire Immediately has On the Floor, which the latter I consider to be one of the best songs of the 2020s, and it was no exception with Glory because it gave us this absolutely beautiful song. Now to be fair, this one wasn't also an instant hit for me. The stop-start composition, as it starts slow with the guitar line, accompanied by Mike Hadrius' fragile vocals, while New Zealand singer Aldous Harding stays in the backing vocals, where it takes its time to transition into the chorus with Aldous Harding's elegant cooing, which then turns into pure chaos with the heavy drums and the tumbling keys as the guitars pick up more intensity for that second verse, before it slows down for one more time for that last chorus, as it then turns to chaos once again for that outro as the heavy guitar riff shows up once again. Yeah, as I said, it took a little bit to grow on me, but once it did reveal itself to be a chaotic but also gorgeous instrumental, where that balance between both emotions is absolutely the appeal, and both singers can show a great amount of interplay. Plus, I've always loved that outro, so that also helped a lot. As in the content of the lyrics, in my perspective, feels like a song about aging, noticing things about yourself that are now different, but also accepting that time keeps going, even if there is still a desire for better days to come. Yeah, you can tell that this album started taking its footing during the pandemic, especially with the themes of self-isolation in other tracks, even if the chorus still kind of feels relatable to this day. Yeah, as I said, this is one that had to sit with me to really make me appreciate it, but honestly, I think that wait was worth it, because it made me love a song that is as crazy as it is beautiful. Also, that music video is fucking nuts.
Somebody died today, I saw his picture in the funny papers. Didn't think anybody died on a Friday. Some angry banker.
Well, this won't be an easy pick to talk about. There isn't really an easy conversation to have about Mac Miller, either his music or about his sudden death. Honestly, I wish I could say I was a bigger fan, knowing how beloved he is, not just by the rap community, but also by multiple artists, either hip-hop or outside of it. And don't get me wrong, that is absolutely understandable. His legacy in the genre will live on, but for as much respect I have for him and his music, I also do feel some distance around it, and sadly that also happened with Balloonerism, his second posthumous album, which was actually recorded back in 2014, which wasn't exactly my thing. Again, that happens. I know that a lot of people like it, and that's completely fine. But there was legitimately one special song from it, that being Funny Papers, which was crossed as the immediate highlight on the album for a lot of people. And yeah, I absolutely have to agree with that. A pretty smooth jazz rap song with a nice piano melody, accompanied by the boom bap percussion and a nice groove, Groove, where Mac Miller's more vulnerable delivery, either in his flow or singing, can still work for the meditative tone of the beat. I do sometimes tend to struggle with his singing, but some of that fragility in the vocals can be a pretty good fit for what he's actually saying. For example, in this song, it feels like an existential rant that starts after Mac Miller reads a newspaper, or funny papers as he calls it, where he reflects on the pages he reads. As in the first verse, he sees that a man died in a drunk driving accident after his divorce, as he admits that he finds peace when he's sleeping, where he imagines a perfect world with the person he loves. But he also has that question of if he'll be on the other side whenever his time comes. And the second verse is around the birth of a boy, as he wonders about the decision of bringing that child into such a grim world while thinking about his own existence and the process of aging, as he tries to clean his thoughts with his drugs. And for the third and final verse, there is a reflection about his success, where a lot of his insecurities perpetuated by the industry come rushing back as he tries to escape them by betting on casinos. It has that feeling of getting stuck with your own thoughts, where you start reminiscing about things that don't exactly matter that much, but you still wind up thinking about them for a certain amount of time, which does happen to be a pretty relatable theme for myself. And with the peaceful atmosphere of the instrumental, and with how raw and unfiltered the lyrics really feel, as I said, there is some relatability to it. I mean, no wonder how so many of his fans got attached to this one, because for as much as I'm still not exactly a fan of his music, it made me feel something. So yeah, it's absolutely one that deserves the love that it gets. Rest in peace, Mac Miller.
The heart is heavy, but it's never held alone. You keep it steady and you find your way home.
In the first segment I mentioned about McKinley Dixon, I did mention the song Run Run Run, which made my list in 2023. Well, for this album, he actually decided to make a sequel to that song. And wouldn't you know, it's just as great, if not better than the original. While the instrumentals aren't exactly that different, as both are in the lane of jazz-influenced rap that McKinley Dixon perfected, on tone, they couldn't be more different. Run 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 felt more alive and carefree, while part 2 is a lot more ominous and focused, as those imperious keys, the drums and strings that open the song allude to, as it also contains the massive horns and a terrific bass line. I really like the tension built in the third verse, especially coming from the horn section, as McKinley Dixon sounds incredibly focused to match the bigness of the arrangement. As in the lyrics, he desires to chase that fame and wealth, going on the road to chase that dream, and even making his long-lost friend proud, even if he still wonders if it would be the right thing to actually resurrect him. I like the line on the first verse, where he alludes that he preferred that his love and friendship would be the thing to revive his friend than some sort of magical power, which adds a lot more vulnerability to the concept. The song is also deemed as the sequel because McKinley Dixon did really like the success of the first song, so he decided that a continuation would be worth it, which honestly feels pretty nice. You know, sometimes sequels don't tend to live to its original, but in this case, well, you already know it. It more than did. And somehow, it's not even the best song on the album. How is that even possible?
Ask what happened, crunch all the numbers, does it make sense? No, math ain't math and mad motherfuckers ain't making rent, so.
And speaking of ambitious and concept records from beloved rappers, well, Clipping, who after a 5-year break since their fantastic Visions of Bodies Being Burned, came back with another layered record, this time with Dead Channel Sky, which embraces cyberpunk iconography for its concept, as its title is an allusion to William Gibson's novel Neuromancer. As sound-wise, it tackles multiple subsets of electronic cultures of the 80s and 90s. Now, I will have to mention that I barely know shit from cyberpunk, even if I know that it's not that uncommon on hip-hop. I just don't have that much knowledge because of lack of opportunity. My cyberpunk knowledge starts with Akira and maybe Ghost in the Shell, and that's it. But that didn't ruin the enjoyment of the album for me, especially when the album feels surprisingly timely on its themes. And with me being a fan of the sounds and their execution, yeah, I was absolutely on board. Not my favorite, it does not come close to Visions of Bodies Being Burned for me, but still consider one of the best rap albums of the year, as my favorite song on the album being The Closer, well, at least on the streaming version, Ask What Happened, a haunting drum and bass-esque song that takes its time to really set its crescendo. As for the first verse, it builds an eerie atmosphere from the bells, the kick drum, and the synths, as David Deek's presence and fast flows progressively feel less distant, as the drum and bass percussion really locks in that third verse, and that's where the song reaches its full crescendo, especially for that instrumental outro. This song is a master at dynamics and building tension. Tension that is well built in the lyrics, where it's the tension between the hackers and the higher class. As David Diggs mentions contrasting events from the 20th century, showing the struggle of the working class perpetuated by the 1% that still leads to the working class fighting against each other, which leads to more prejudice, which, well, is still applicable to this day. Then you have that second verse that mentions multiple events from the Reagan presidency, either in the US, for example the Iran-Contra deal or the crack epidemic, or globally, like the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, but also mentioning how many fought the system by playing with implemented technology and turning into something different, as it mentions the birth of the hacking culture with the innovation of technology and how hip-hop and DJing were built from breaking already established norms, which was also a form of resistance. As a conclusion for the album, it's pretty fitting, not just by defining how these systems can be broken, but also connects the birth of hip-hop with revolutionary ideals. And while I guess not everything about this song and album are fully up to date, again, this takes inspirations from 80s cyberpunk culture, so I don't really blame them, the fact that they got so much right while still making a banger out of it, that is truly special. As I said, truly spectacular song. It absolutely belongs here.
Knock the cell, keep the devil out. Knives by the window, find you where you idle. A death rattle for the ages, 20-year cycle, breaking mirrors, shattered gazes.
And we are not stopping with hip-hop yet. As I said, this year was fantastic for the genre, outside of the mainstream at least, as we got another extremely eventful year for Billy Woods, either with his Arm & Hammer group alongside with Elucid, or with his solo material, as we got a new album from him, which the title is an offensive term I cannot say, which also stands as one of Billy Woods' least accessible projects to date, especially in contrast with Maps from 2023, that probably got him his biggest critical acclaim as to date. This one is a much bleaker, even horror-infused sounding record that discussed much more heavier and surrealist topics that aren't exactly the easiest sell. And I mean, it's not like Maps is completely representative of Billy Woods' discography. Quite frankly, it feels more like an outlier. But I think more than ever, I saw a lot of people jumping ship with this record. Which, I mean, yeah, it's a tougher sell than many of his other albums, but I still found a lot that I did like from the album. Not my favorite from his, but still a great one. Ballet Paint Test revealed to be the one that stood out to me the most. Not just by having my favorite beat on the album, as this smooth, jazz-inspired beat with the horn line, the haunting minor key melody, and that lightweight boom-bap percussion, as the interludes that sample soft landing from Maps transitions each verses. That sample is also a mention to Toni Morrison's 1987 novel Beloved, which are very reminiscent to the themes of this album. And in this song, the themes feel more grounded, but still as tragic, as it's a song tackling childhood and generational trauma, as both verses from Elucid, Cavalier, and Billy Woods mention similar instances of said trauma and how they are passed down from generation to generation, as these memories still haunt them, either the abuse mentioned in Elucid's verse, or the poverty mentioned in Cavalier's verse. But I think the verse that stuck with me the most was with Billy Woods, as after mentioning a traumatic memory of his father putting their childhood pet out of their misery, which his parents reacted nonchalantly, he talks about his own effects of that trauma, where his family rather just not talk about it instead of actually addressing it, or how he fears that those same generational traumas get passed down to his son, or just the fear and paranoia of opening some of these wounds, which are exemplified by the last lines of the verse. As with most of the album, it is pretty loaded, and there's a lot that won't relate to me, obviously. Again, I would love to hear people's opinions on the songs mentioned here, but Billy Woods' storytelling has always been truly special, and with a beat I adore, it just leads to a heavy but still amazing song. Again, with Billy Woods, you have to take it a bit slow to understand everything. Hell, there might still be stuff that I don't, but trust me, it is worth it.
Paranoia got me looking out the window. Mood might change depending on how the wind blow.
Little Sim's career trajectory has been in a weird position. Obviously, it's not like she left. Last year, she released a small EP, which focused in more house and even Brazilian funk elements. But 2025 was her full comeback year, and she came back with another great album. The things behind the curtains have been slightly complicated, especially with the massive falling off she had with her former producer, No Inflow, which even led into a lawsuit. And here's where we get Lotus, which is her description description of healing through complicated times, which is conveyed by the progressive arrangement, as you get that soulful intro that then transitions into the delicate keys, the guitar line, and the drums as Michael Kiwanuka takes the chorus, but it is in that second extended verse where the crescendo gets built, as they tune in the bass line and the drums get more intense, as well as Little Sims's tone, which is then transitioned to an even bigger second chorus from Kiwanuka, where the strings make it sound as grand as possible, as the third verse takes a more grounded tone, where after the last choruses, Yusef Days takes over for the instrumental to simmer for the last 2 minutes. Honestly, that second verse might be one of my favorites of the year, not just by the shift in intensity that is so well built, as it feels like Sims is truly letting all of her rage out, especially for what she's saying. As much as this song is about reconstruction of your own self after dark times, as she compares herself with a lotus, she's putting herself first for once, not letting anyone get on her way. As that second verse, she targets everyone who might call her insincere when it comes to her talking about social issues. She's someone who will do it, but on her own time and manner. She wants to let the music speak for herself, and also improve herself. And I mean, there is a truthness to what she says, especially because many people expect artists to be aware of everything happening in the world, not because they care about it, but to feel better about themselves. It's hypocritical and fairly parasocial, but at the end, she knows who she is, and she knows she can prevail through hard times, and this is what's at the core of the album and song. So to sound this triumphant, it really is a blessing. Not quite the most cathartic song on the album, but we'll get to it soon. For now, yeah, this is still beautiful. Now, talk about just an absolutely wonderful song. Now, this is nothing new for Ichiko Aoba, Japanese folk and new age artist who's been a critical darling in the scene for years, either by her lush guitar-focused arrangements or her beautiful voice. I've come to know her a couple years ago with the album When Swept the Dawn, most specifically the song Dawn of the Adam, which I would consider to be one of my favorite songs of this decade. And checking out parts of her material does leave me a bit at odds with her music, where you respect the craft and atmosphere, but you kinda wish you liked it more. But I still found a lot of enjoyment out of her 2025 album Luminescent Creatures, as a lot of it centers into Ichiko Aoba's lush and even aquatic ambience, which would make sense because this was actually inspired in Aoba's own adventures along the Ryukuku archipelago. And speaking of songs that sound like they're taking you through an underwater trip, well, Luciferine, the absolute best song on the album that left me at awe the first time I heard it, and its composition is its biggest strength, as every element floats around the mix effortlessly, from the terrific interplay of the strings and the major keys, as you get other additions like the splashes of guitar, flutes, and chimes, as each section is transitioned so naturally, and Ichiko Aoba's higher pitch sounds as pretty as you can expect. It brings such a peaceful atmosphere that feels like you're experiencing such atmosphere, where that escape to a peaceful place is also the main mantra of the lyrics. I also love the vocal harmonies at the last chorus. They're just legitimately beautiful. Yeah, there's not really a hidden secret about this one. This is just one of the prettiest songs I heard this year. A song that invites you into a nature trip, and it's truly spellbinding.
Astonishing.
For me, my biggest surprise when I made my first top 50 best songs of the year back in 2023 was probably the inclusion of this band, Model Actriz, a band that tends to mix a lot of industrial and noise rock elements with more dance punk elements alongside with queer themes. Now, when it comes to their sound, I'll be honest, I didn't think it was gonna work for me, but their debut, Dog's Body, just hit me like a fucking truck. No, like seriously, it's a terrific album that showed so much promise for the future. And while I guess their sophomore album from this year, Pirouette, isn't as great as the debut, I still thought it was very strong. And the lead single of the album, Cinderella, still represents everything I love from this band, as that dance groove combined itself with the more industrial elements perfectly. Coming from the noisy guitars, the stiff bass line, the manic drums, and all of the distortion, as Cole Hayden's vocals have picked up a lot more flair, while still sounding as raw and horny as possible. The album itself does include a lot more singing than the debut, and honestly, I do think it works. The chaotic but intimate tone is a balance that Model Actrice have perfected in their music, either sound-wise or by the themes, as he describes a date with this man where he might have just wanted the sex without a deeper connection, but he wound up being different. A date so good that he breaks down his defenses, putting full trust on someone who seems to treat him so well, feeling like he can emotionally connect with him, as he shares a story that is in the core of his trauma, where he wanted a Cinderella-themed birthday party for his 5th birthday, and when he changed his mind, that decision to share something so intimate, that scarred him for life. By the way, the moment where he mentions the Cinderella birthday party, there's a sprinkling sound in the background that is just such a smart move. I love it. For as horny as the song is, it also feels like a song of self-discovery, where you understand the roots of your trauma and try to tackle it. In this case, emotionally connect with someone who is opening the doors for that intimacy. Where at the bridge, he warns that this experience will forever change him. God, what a ride this one is. It stands out as one of Model Actrice's best songs to date, not just by its chaotic but still wildly entertaining instrumental, but for its compelling subject matter of self-discovery. A fairy tale story indeed. Well, talk about a swerve and a half. I mean, Rosalía is not one to play it safe with her sound, but at first, even I wasn't expecting the beast that Luke's was. An ambitious pop album that goes full deep into classical elements, switching through multiple language while tackling topics like love and religion. But honestly, the more you think about it, it's not exactly that shocking that she took this kind of swing, especially with the pedigree of Rosalía's talent. Let me remind you that El Mal Querer was her graduation project for her bachelor's degree. That is quite frankly insane. I will admit that Luke's took me a bit to grow on me. Either the more slower ballads and the more abbreviated songs were a bit difficult to stomach at first, but once they did, it really showed the talent and beauty that is hidden on this record. Take a song like Berghain, the lead single of the album, a classical pop song that features the set of strings and the opera choir playing off each other in a frenetic way, where you have Rosalía in an operatic tone in the first verse, as the song switches from German to Spanish to English, and also has features from Bjork and Yves Stummer, where on the outro, Yves Stummer is shouting, "I'll fuck you till you love me." Sounds fucking insane, doesn't it? And yet, it works. A lot, actually. As the key for the song to really grow on you is on those little details. Not just by sounding wild but yet beautiful, where that frenetic tone is by design, the fact that Rosalía can sell that operatic tone in her vocals without sounding out of depth in any way possible, honestly, that's crazy. Or how every verse has a different mood from each other, which matches perfectly with what's in fact said or what could be said. As at least from what I think it could be about a toxic relationship where this partner occupies every part of her own self, becoming extremely codependent to him and accommodating herself to his desires. Or maybe it could just be about darkness consuming her soul. That is possible. Where Bjork's vocals serve as a warning that at this point the only way that the soul can be saved is by something divine, an intervention out of this world. As for Yves Stummer, which comes from an infamous moment coming from Mike Tyson, where he said that to a journalist, I honestly don't know exactly what it could be, but in my perspective, which, again, I could be wrong, is what that all-consuming love can truly become. Something sinister as to what being said in that final verse. I feel like this is one that I will definitely need to explore more to maybe ever fully understand it, but it still feels so fascinating. Not to mention how much of a bold statement this one is as a whole, and how much it really works at the end. So yeah, this one is for the ages, as its quality is just beyond divine. Truly spectacular stuff coming from Rosalía. For as bloated and as underwhelming Hurry Up Tomorrow really was as an album, not even to mention that god-awful and worthless movie, I feel like The Weeknd had to drop a pop song so good that it felt like an apology. And well, Open Hearts is that song. And you know what? Apology accepted, because my god, this song is fucking phenomenal. As a synth pop banger, yeah, it's a formula that The Weeknd fucking loves, but it's a formula that he has learned to master. Where that synth bass and percussion feel as bombastic as ever, the synth palette just becomes stronger to the point where they just completely explode for the drop after the choruses, which fuck yeah, give me more of this. Where the crux of the song is about letting yourself open your heart again after multiple heartbreaks, which, I mean, yeah, nothing deep, but if this is the way he's selling that urgency for love, then my god, I get it. Look, it's been a while since I've actually been impressed with a The Weeknd song. I don't care for most of the songs of The Idol, and I didn't care for the Hurry Up Tomorrow singles, so for as much as this is still standard for The Weeknd, my god, he's still got it. Please, I'm begging, if you are still thinking about not retiring, I need you to make more songs like this, please. It's now time for the top 10. Let's not waste any more time.
I got a blanket with me in the riding. I'll make it so my niggas never dying.
As I said, Clips wasn't gonna be the only act with 3 songs on this list, as McKinley Dixon got that achievement as well. As I'm saying, the album is just that good, with this being the title track and also its biggest banger. Talk about a song that lives up to its title, as with the beat that sounds like fire, as the tumbling keys, the flute, the swaggering bass, the chanting, the live drums, and the saxophone that just goes off, especially during that second verse, as McKinley Dixon gives his more uplifting performance on the album. It sounds like a song that takes you on a ride where you can have the most fun possible. And that call for community is really what defines this song, especially thematic-wise, as he sees that the magic that he's been trying to discover through this whole album is to cherish the moments with the people he loves the most. The stories you can tell about them while having fun with them. That's what feels like magic for him. For as layered and cool of a concept that Magic Alive the album really is, honestly, the appeal of this one is just so easy to understand. It's a song that truly transcends on its amazingness by just being an amazingly fun banger that feels like the most optimistic in the album. As you can see, this was the one that I came back the most from the record. It's just beyond magical. So this is quite frankly Miley Cyrus's best song to date, and I don't think it's close. On sound alone, I think I can back up that point, as this is probably some of Miley's most explosive and euphoric arrangement she's ever gotten. And honestly, it was for the better. Another disco-inspired pop song with a slick groove, the light percussion, the electric guitar touches, as the synth gloss that permeates the song gives it this feeling of grandeur that makes it sound completely out of this world. And while Miley Cyrus gives a pretty damn great performance that evokes the emotions of the song pretty well, the star of the show has to be Brittany Howard. She was present in my list last year with songs like Prove It To You and Red Flags, but her presence is the key to unlock this song to its fullest potential, and she's just using her vocals as a part of the instrumental, and yet it works so well. As per the writing, it's Miley Cyrus's struggle to handle her life in the spotlight, as she forces a smile to deal with all of it, even if sometimes she desires for a more intimate connection outside of the camera's view. And I mean, at the outro, the song does kinda sound like a bit of an ego trip, where Brittany Howard is hyping Miles' status as a timeless celebrity. But first, I do somewhat believe that it's a bit more of a reciprocal relationship, where Miley also feels the same love for her fans as her fans do to her. And second, even if it's an ego trip, have you heard that outro? I don't care if it goes a bit longer than it should, it just sounds phenomenal. With the bigness of the sound, you do at least see her effort to want to push herself into immortal status. Yeah, this is one that won me over on sound alone, but man, when you do something this brilliant, I just have to acknowledge it. I'm not afraid to call this Miley Cyrus's best song to date. It's a true magnum opus for her, and if she ever wants to keep making more stuff like this, I am so thrilled to take on this ride. And speaking of different returns, after a 5-year break, Car Seat Headrest returned with a new album, this time with a massive rock opera concept, where it takes place in the fictional Parnassus University, as it takes the point of view of many anthropomorphic characters that reside at university, some of them that are in the single and album covers for this record. Not gonna lie, I did not know that Will Toledo was a furry. It's a behemoth of an album that sounds a lot more optimistic than Car Seat Headrest's other projects, and while the length of of the album can be a bit of a detriment sometimes, I still found it to be extremely charming. But I think the opener, CCF, I'm Gonna Stay With You, was the one that hit me from the jump, especially for its cathartic sound, as this 8-minute anthemic banger, building itself slowly with the keys and drum patter, as that fuzzy electric guitar melody and the intro that hits you with some beautiful vocal melodies. By the way, the vocal melodies on this song are just truly excellent, as it then fully explodes after that intro, as the choruses feature the additions of horns, which in interplay with the electric guitar is just an absolute joy. But the bridge is honestly my favorite, where that euphoria point is at its highest and the vocal melodies reach its peak of greatness. And while I have criticized Will Toledo's singing before, but he's always been a good performer, and he's been improving his vocal ability as well. On sound alone, I think this would have cemented its spot. It's truly cathartic in the most obvious way possible. Now this is the point where I talk about the lyrics, and look, I think this is one of the few songs that is on sound alone because I tried diving into the themes of this album and I was lost. Even having seen some of the parts of the libretto, which is where all of the lore of the album is. But from what I've understood, this is from the point of view of Biolko, the goat character who has an appreciation and feels connected to the founder of the university and wants to find out if that connection is actually true, as the lyrics are sprawled with Bible references that can also be double entendres to other characters, as it feels like he desires for something new in his life, maybe something that can match with the happiness he felt during the best memories of his past, like his love for Cartoon Fridays. Sometimes it feels like those memories are the things that make him stay alive when no one else seems to. That's honestly all I could figure it out, but I think the feeling I got most from this song was a sense of freedom, not just in its anthemic sound, but its feeling of trying to discover something new. But I'll be honest, if I had to say that the lyrics were the main thing that made me love this song, I would be lying to myself, but this was one of the bangers that dared to soar this high. In a year like this, the main feeling I was trying to get from my music was catharsis, and this was one of those. While making this list, originally this was outside of my top 10. It was number 11 in fact, but the more listens I gave to this, and the rush that I was feeling while listening to it, and also the help of a certain YouTube critic, High Spectrum Pulse, kinda cemented its position. The song just clearly stays with you, you know?
Ain't nothing sweeter than the last breath. Ain't nothing sweeter than the last step. Ain't nothing.
So, Only Dust Remains by Backwash was my favorite album of 2025, as it amplifies its themes and streamlines its sound without making it feel less bleak, with some of the most harrowing songs of the whole year. She definitely dropped an album that, in my opinion, should be considered as one of the best of the decade. And while to be fair, there haven't been any songs from it on this top 50 until now. If you've seen that other short video with my number 100 to 51 picks, she still got represented. If you want the proof to Backwash's talent, it's Knife Heaven. A song that's chilling, but in a way, also thrilling, as the haunting vocal sample alongside with the gospel choir, with the heavy snare drum where the percussion becomes faster as it progresses, especially for that bridge, the pretty key melody, and Backwash's intense but desperate performance, it strikes between the eerie and beautiful in the best way possible. And as dark as this song can sound, there's a hopeful tone to the lyrics that do strike a bit of a chord, as it feels like a song about accepting mortality, not exactly glorifying death, but not fearing it either, as she's ready to face it whenever it comes. And when that moment finally comes, maybe that transcendence might find her some peace at the end. And that outro, where she declares that she's ready to face whatever comes next, I don't know, it just feels beautiful. Obviously, people will take different meanings and lessons from songs, but with this song, it was one that at least helped me accept that fact too. Again, not a glorification, but at least understand that it happens to everyone. And whenever that moment comes, which hopefully for me, it's in a very distant future, maybe you can find some freedom with it. So yeah, this one is indeed special. I'm glad for the existence of this song and album, and hopefully we can hear more from Backwash soon. Give her a chance. She's absolutely worth your time. Well, here's a late addition to this list, coming from Swedish artist Anna von Hausswolff, as her newest album, Iconoclasts, being her latest album since 2020, an album that its meaning relies on the title a lot, as an iconoclast is viewed as a challenger of already established beliefs or traditions, either as a way of destruction of those beliefs or push forward into new ones, and this album characterizes different situations that felt iconoclastic to the singer. And I will admit that I didn't love the whole record, especially the more ambient or drone-inspired sections. It's a me thing, I'll admit, those genres never really worked for me, but the parts that worked for me, which usually were the bombastic post-rock bangers, were honestly some of the best songs of the year. Look at a song like Struggle with the Beast. The song starts as an instrumental piece, with possibly one of the catchiest saxophone motives I've heard this whole year. That motive is called The Beast, as it's accompanied by the drums, synth, bass, and brass line, as they keep piling up more saxophone lines to make it as powerful as possible, with a switch up around the 3-minute mark that is so seamless that you don't even notice. And for those 3 minutes and a half, it is just an instrumental piece, until Anna von Hausswolff starts singing. And one thing that I haven't mentioned is that I absolutely adore her vocals. She not only has some insane vocal chops, but she's a master at dynamics when it comes to her vocals, knowing exactly when to go for broke, as the tone of the instrumental around her either gets higher or lower. I absolutely love that the last motive, before the Beast motive comes back, sounds as apocalyptic as possible, especially with the strings section, where the lyrics can also take the front stage, as it feels like the description of struggling to control yourself, not letting your most negative emotions through, not trying to let that beast out for everyone to see, and shattering that person's view of themselves. Looking through my research, I remembered that Anna von Hausswolff said in an interview that the song was inspired in her friend's battle with psychosis, which takes the song into a much darker turn, as you see everyone around you getting scared of you for something you can't really control. Now, I cannot say this from experience because I don't struggle with psychosis, but an experience like that, I would assume that it most probably would shatter your perspective of life, an experience that I'm guessing would also feel iconoclastic for Anna von Hausswolff. If I had to take a moment that absolutely marked my experience of this song, is that third verse, where Anna von Hausswolff screeches at the top of her lungs, "I'm fucked up in my head," just before the arrangement gets even higher. My god, this song really takes you on a journey. A heavy one, for sure, but one that I'm still happy that I took it. Unbelievably amazing song, and somehow, it's not even the best song on the album. So I briefly mentioned that Jane Remover made another project outside of their own main alias this year. Well, this year we got that with Venturing, which its sound is more acquainted to an album like Census Designated from 2023, diving into more noise rock and even shoegaze elements, as it dives through a lot more intimate moments that weren't present in Revenge Seekers. And while at first I did really like it, and I still think it's pretty great, a lot of it wound up being overshadowed by Revenge Seekers for me, except for one song, that being Dead Forever, which blew me away the first time I heard it and never really got old for me. Dead Forever is this dark, shoegaze-inspired rock track, where the mix is filled with distortion, from the guitar line, the drums, the bass line, to Jane Remover's vulnerable vocals that even through the distortion you can hear the emotion, especially around the screams in the last chorus, as the stripped-down verses contrast with the explosiveness of the choruses, as it feels like a scream of frustration, as you can hear their discomfort with fame, as they can see how manipulative the industry can really be, and how many people treat them like a thing instead of a human being. Where if this is what stardom leads up to, they rather pass the fever to someone else, and the lyrics themselves feel extremely raw. And when that song ends with that shredding guitar solo after the last chorus, god, it really hits you like a fucking train. You can tell that this is a very personal song for Jane Remover, so really, I do genuinely hope that they are doing fine. But if I can say one thing, is that they absolutely delivered so much great music this year. And even if I still prefer Revenge Seekers, Dead Forever is still my favorite song they've released this year.
June 4th and the night's fading. How am I escaping? My reasons don't need explaining. 8 months to the Pisces season change.
So So this is the opening song from Little Sims' album. I mentioned that because quite frankly, this is one of the boldest ways I've seen any artist open up an album in recent memory, either sound or thematic wise, because on sound, it's this angry rock / post-punk banger relying on the somber bass line and that grim guitar riff, as the intense drums pile up that anger even further, which is exacerbated by the string flourishes in the chorus. The arrangement's intensity is legitimately powerful, and while you can say that this is not unfamiliar territory for Little Sims, especially with some songs from the Grey Area having similar arrangements, it's what she does with this instrumental that makes it so great, as her performance conveys a lot of emotions, ire, paranoia, exhaustion, all of it justified by what she's saying in this song, as this is by far the angriest and most explicit song about her falling off with Inflo, as from what we know, she gave him a loan of more than £1 million that never got paid, which was the reason as to why she took him to court. And Little Sims does not hold any punches either, as she feels like he not only financially exploited her, but also manipulated and sold her a lie of success, which makes it all the more crushing when she mentions that they knew each other their whole life, but now she sees him for what he is, a lying thief who will prevail in the cost of others. And now that she's free of him, she can find some solace that she will move on and find her own path while his ship keeps sailing. It's not a pretty song, you can feel the exhaustion spilling through the edges, but it serves as an introduction to an album which focuses on self-healing, and sometimes letting all of your negative emotions out is part of that journey, which is why I love the song so much. Not only it's audacious as fuck, but it serves as the cathartic middle finger to someone who wronged you for so long, so that's why it's one of the best songs of the year, at least in my opinion. So this was my first contender for Song of the Year when it dropped, and let me tell you, it took it a while to be unseated, as Spelling dropped her lead single for her latest album, Portrait of My Heart, in January. Another album that wasn't as acclaimed as her earlier record, The Turning Wheel, which is another album I was very late to the party. In fact, I only managed to check it out while I was doing the script for this video, but that I still found to have it some highlights. And the second that this song dropped, yeah, I knew it was gonna be this high, because this feels anthemic in the best way possible, as it is a new shift for Spelling. Instead of the beautiful Baroque / progressive pop sound that she mastered in The Turning Wheel, this new era was introduced with a more pop rock leaning sound, that she nonetheless perfected with the title track, as the driving drums alongside with the acoustic guitar and the bass line driving to a build-up for that chorus that is just splendid, especially as the strings appear in the chorus. Another detail I love is in the second chorus, where the mix gets filtered into sounding like it's underwater for the first bars, which honestly feels like an incredible touch. I also love that the third verse picks up a steady rhythm and amps up the intensity to really deliver that crescendo at the final chorus, which is also helped by Spelling's performance. While for The Turning Wheel, she was more known for her theatrical and elastic vocals, very reminiscent to Kate Bush, she replaces that tone with more firepower on the vocals. The absolute right choice that she can back up. And I like the lyrics too, as she craves for a new direction. She doesn't feel like herself currently, maybe because of choices of her own doing, so she's gonna try and find a new direction where maybe she can find love at the end of the tunnel. A nice sentiment that is incredibly well sold. Every I don't belong here present in the chorus feels like a shot of adrenaline that is so worth experiencing. In a way, it's also a declaration of transformation, which is something she did for this new album, which kinda makes sense as to why this was chosen as the lead single. I know some people didn't really vibe with this new direction, and while I agree that most of it doesn't quite match the highs of The Turning Wheel, I mean, it is kinda hard to come close to a song like Boys at School, this one absolutely did. This song definitely belongs in my heart, that's for sure.
We were in a race to grow up yesterday.
I mean, are y'all surprised that this is here? I have shown to be a pretty big Ethel Cain fan before, and while there's been a lot of discourse surrounding her name lately, mainly around some allegations of some pretty awful behavior that I'm not gonna make any excuses for, it still wound up being an eventful year for her. First with the release of Perverts, a 90-minute drone EP about masturbation. I did respect what he was trying to do, and I still found it to be for the most part pretty good, but I also had to admit that it wasn't that much for me, And in August, there would be the release of Willoughby Tucker, I'll Always Love You, which was sort of a prequel to Preacher's Daughter, as it tackles the messy relationship between Ethel and Willoughby Tucker, which in my opinion, I did like it a lot more. Even if it's still not better than Preacher's Daughter, honestly, I'm not asking for that. But when I first heard Nettles, I knew this was gonna be a song that would stick with me, as it is a slow, 8-minute Americana ballad that relies on an elongated but still beautiful fiddle pickup, as well as the presence of the acoustic and steel guitars, the banjo, the piano keys, the drums that pick up after that first chorus, and some synths that are actually the same ones used for the soundtrack of Twin Peaks, which Ethel Cain actually bought for this song, which is a pretty nice touch, as the melancholic tone of the instrumental is pretty similar to the works of someone like Julie Cruz and Angelo Badalamenti, who worked on the soundtrack of that show. And that's not to mention Ethel Cain's subtle but still emotive vocals, with her vocal overdubs that amp up the sentimental core of the song to even bigger levels. I mean, by instrumental and composition alone, this would have had a shot on this list. But then you get into the lyrics, which are some of the most heartfelt lyrics that I honestly heard all year, as she sees in the future that her relationship with Willoughby will not end well, as she sees that the relationship is starting to form cracks and doesn't feel like the same passionate love she craved, which is perpetuated by their own traumas, which leads to their emotional disconnection. But she wants to make it work. She just wants Willoughby to hug her and assure her that everything will be okay. For that premonition that happens in the last song of the album to not happen, even if they are doomed to fail, the line "to love me is to suffer me" is one that permeates throughout the song, as she's also aware that she's not easy to connect. To love her and know her in a deeper level, you must be prepared to love her even in her worst moments, which isn't exactly the healthiest sentiment out there, but it's also one that makes it all the more devastating in the context of the album. These are two broken people destroyed by their own childhood, trying to roam life together in the best way they can, even if everything is stacked up against them. So you get that sinking feeling that something will go awry at some point, which Ethel Cain also feels it. And combined with the stunning arrangements, yeah, it just leaves you speechless. This was my number one for a long time, and honestly, it's really not that hard to see why. It's one of the prettiest but also haunting songs Ethel Cain has ever made. So the fact that there was anything that could have topped this is truly astounding. So what song did it? You know, with every list I make, I usually try to ask what makes a song worthy of being my favorite song of the year. Usually, I try to find a sentiment as to what makes it so deserving of that title for me. And with my last pick, I think I found what might be some of those feelings. First, it's the element of surprise. A song that blew me away the first time I heard it, and that stuck around for me, revealing even more amazing elements along the way. Another is the sense of euphoria. A song that goes all in with some idea or sounds so well that it creates a feeling of rush that is undeniable. What I'm trying to say is that if I thought that Mahash Mashana by Father John Misty was my favorite song of the 2020s by a mile, it might finally have some competition. I mean, I did say that the best songs from Iconoclast were something else, but never in my life I would have expected something as special as this. First of all, another record is broken. This is now the longest song to ever be featured in one of these lists, clocking in at 11 minutes. And you know what? Not a single minute in this song is wasted, because this is a fucking masterpiece from start to finish. A song that doesn't waste your time inviting you into its sheer unbridled power. It feels like it's separated in multiple movements that constantly keeps getting higher, as the first part starts with the massive bass line, the booming drums, and the ominous synthesizer for that intro, as it quiets down to introduce us to Anna von Hausswolff's presence. I already said that she was a force to be reckoned with when it comes to her vocals, but especially here, as the backing vocals can just sound as impactful while never overshadowing her. As the song keeps going, you get that first key change, as that even bass line in unison with the galloping percussion, and Anna von Hausswolff just amping up the intensity of her vocals, it becomes an experience that is impossible to explain. and then the song just interrupts itself, and then it picks up again, as it quickly gains even more intensity without ever getting overblown. And then the song diminishes its intensity with these walls of noises for that final part, where alongside with the sinuous synths, you get this beautiful saxophone motif, where Anna von Hausswolff, alongside with the angelic choir, sounds at her most understated. It's a bold but truly unbelievable piece, where for its 11-minute runtime, it keeps hitting you with ideas that sound as incredible as the other, and for its grandiose arrangement, it makes sense for the big emotions portrayed in the song. It's the somewhat title track on the album. While every song can have a different experience that can feel life-changing, this is the moment of the album where it is at its most literal, as it begs for the destruction of old beliefs and traditions to put into place new ones that can change your life for the better. And with everything around it, it sells the urgency to its maximum. It's not a maybe tomorrow, it's a now. It's a decision that needs to be taken as fast as possible, because sometimes those already imposed traditions can be hurtful. As for the last verse, my guess is that this is the moment where she accepts those changes and manages to rise through the struggles. I feel like a lot of these thoughts truly define what this song is. A call for the destruction of established traditions with a soundscape that sounds as epic as possible. This is what Euphoria feels like. It has no fear of going for broke, and the fact that it's 11 minutes long and not a single second is wasted, that is legitimately special. There have been plenty of songs this year that felt anthemic and life-changing, but none as much as this one. And that is why The Iconoclast by Anna von Hausswolff is the best song of 2025, at least to me.
Can I protect you?
Anyways, this video doesn't need a long introduction, it's already as long as it is. Subscribe to my channel, follow me on my social media, go do the 2025 Canada Year-End Breakdown, and that's it. I hope I see y'all soon!